everyone. My name is Gabriel Martinez, and today I am here with.
Martin Devecka, hi, Director of the Ancient Studies Program at UCSC.
Well, thank you so much for being here with me today, Professor Devecka. So, today we are going through underworld deities across different cultures, and specifically on the Greek deity Hades, the Hindu
Mhm.
deity Yama, the ancient Egypt deity Osiris, and the Aztec deity Mictlantecuhtli.
Mhm.
So before we get started though, I'll let you introduce yourself and give give the audience a brief overview of yourself.
Yeah, my name is Martin Devecka. I am an associate professor in the literature department and the director of the Ancient Studies program at UCSC. Ancient Studies is a program where we teach about ancient stuff. So if you're in the class that this presentation is being recorded for, you are taking a class that counts for ancient studies. We got a major, we got a minor. We teach various languages. At this point, Latin and Greek, though we are hoping to get Arabic going again if the university turns out to be able to afford to have Arabic taught. So if that's something you're interested in, if you'd like to take more classes like the one you're currently taking, shoot me an email and we can have a little meeting about it.
Okay, thank you, Professor. I'll make sure to put your email in the video. And I guess let's get started. So first thing we'll go into Hades, the Greek god. So how do you think Greek ideas about the structure of the universe shape the way people imagine Hades and the underworld?
Yeah, this is it's a difficult question to give a kind of a straightforward answer to. Because whenever I'm thinking about a question like this, I'm thinking, well, what texts are we looking at? What archaeological artifacts are we looking at for our answers? And the answers that different texts and different artifacts are going to give us are going to be different. So the earliest, oldest Greek reference to the realm of Hades is in Homer's Odyssey. And there it's actually described not as being an underworld, but as being kind of an outer world. It's the part of the world that is across the river ocean. So it's not under the earth, it's just way far out there. You have to travel across the ocean to get to it. There, the structure of the universe that's being invoked seems to be more or less a kind of a flat earth with a domed sky above it. And elsewhere in Homeric poetry, you can see lots of references being made to that.
Yeah, because if I recall, the way that ancient cultures view the whole the structure of the cosmos, they shape it in a they shape it in layers. They don't shape it as separate realms. They shape it in a layered universe. Why do you think that is?
Well, it really varies from culture to culture. The Mexica view is very super layered. Depending on which text you're looking at, there are a dozen, 2 dozen different layers to the layer cake that is the universe. I would not say that the Greek structure of the world is layered in quite the same way. But I would want to ask, what do you mean by separate realms when you phrase the question like that?
So in separate realms, this means so think of it as right now I'll say think of it as a sphere. So there's one realm for underworld, there's one realm
Mhm.
for the overworld, and then there's another realm for the the cosmos, the sky, stuff like that. But what I'm getting at for a layered is there's one layer for the cosmos sky, there's another layer for overworld, there's an under layer for the underworld, and there's stuff in between.
Yeah, I think that does again sort of vary from culture to culture. Um, but there is a version of the Greek world picture that kind of looks like that, right? Where there's a more or less flat Earth with Olympus, which is up in the sky, and various gods hanging out up there. And an underworld, which is in Hesiod, which is the text that I'm getting this from, called Tartaros. It's not really Hades' place yet, which is as far beneath the earth as the sky is above. And that's kind of a layering. I would say briefly to that question that people don't seem to have necessarily a good sense of the scales of distance involved in traveling, say, from the Earth to the Moon, and then the much greater distance that would be involved in traveling from the Moon to the Sun. Although people figure that out surprisingly early. We're talking like 300, 200 BCE. People start to realize, well, you can do some simple math and figure out that these celestial bodies have to be super far away. Just thinking in terms of the way that objects cast shadows on Earth, if the sun were that close, the mechanics of shadows and day-night cycles and things would be a lot different than now. So I think that's maybe where a bit of a sense of separation comes in the way that you see the sort of Plato, Aristotle, multiple spheres nested within each other world picture getting set up. On the other hand, that's also a very layered world picture. You know, people in the ancient world in the medieval period are always comparing it to sort of skins in an onion, right? The layers are right next to one another. But if you want to talk about separation there in terms of a sense of the enormous distances involved, then there is a distinction that you can make between that and a sort of layered picture of the worlds where, you know, the layers aren't actually that far apart.
Yeah, I mean, it's a really like difficult subject to get into because there's a lot about it, and also there's like we don't know everything about the ancient world because there's some stuff that are hidden, there's stuff that were burned, and there's tons of knowledge that was just lost. But do you think there's like any Greek stories out there or beliefs that like link certain stars or directions to death or the underworld?
Yeah, it's hard to speak in absolute terms, but generally speaking, right, the underworld as the realm of Hades is dark. There are no stars down there. So although there are specific what are called catasterisms, right, constellations that are made out of dead people or people who get slurped up out of bad situations on Earth and put into constellations in the sky, there is not really, I think, a celestial body that is closely connected with Hades. So in some specific narratives, like for instance the one that Plato describes at the end of Phaedo, you get a different picture of the afterlife, in which souls that have transcended life on Earth, philosophical souls, end up living on the moon, which is a different kind of a realm in space. But there aren't really supposed to be celestial bodies in Hades. There's another point in the Odyssey where some guys have just shown up and stolen the sun god's magic cattle, and he's super mad. And he says, hey, if you don't get my cattle back, I'm gonna go shine in Hades, and you'll get to see all the nasty stuff that's down there. But that's only an effective threat because the sun doesn't normally go down there. Normally all those skeletons and dead bodies and stuff are in the dark. So you don't have to worry about it. Whether that's the way that people actually think about this stuff, or whether the sort of popular beliefs are different than what you see represented in these literary texts is another complicated question. But I'm thinking now about a magic spell from a collection called the Papyri Graecae Magicae, It's the Greek magical papyri. And these guys are from 3rd, 4th, 5th centuries CE. So hard to date them exactly. They're basically papyri full of magic spells. But this one has instructions for making a curse tablet that you're going to put on someone. So you put the curse on lead, you roll it up, you put some a trademark blend of herbs and spices on it, just so it tastes good. And then you drop it in a river or a spring or a well or something. It's got to go underwater. And you can pull it back up if you want to break the curse or something. You should tie it with a string. But the thing you have to be worried about is when the moon passes under the earth, which I think, sort of reconstruct from context, is supposed to be on the new moon, when we can't see the moon up here. There's a moon under the ground. Then you have to do some chanting around your curse if you don't want it to be broken, because if the moon shines on it from below, then the curse will be broken. So that suggests that somebody thinks that there's a moon that travels under the earth. Now with these Greek magical papyrus texts, there's a lot of Greek influence, there's a lot of Egyptian influence, there's some Near Eastern stuff, there's some probably heretical Jewish material getting in there. So it's really tough to sort out where these ideas are coming from. But that's another instance where there is a celestial body that's going underground.
Okay, yeah. I mean, when it comes to the underworld, they do have a lot of connection to the sun setting, the night sky, a lot to the moon as well. So we'll move on for the next question in sake of time. We'll move on to the Hindu god Yama. How do you think early Indian ideas about the sky influenced like the way they understood Yama and the afterlife?
Well, so you've had some intro lectures about ancient Indian stargazing strategies. And I think that those lectures focused a lot on sort of Mahabharata material. The stuff that I'm familiar with is mostly Vedic, which is a lot older than that. But it's material in which Yama plays a distinct, not super important, but visible role as a god of death. And it's also material that presents a very clear, like, view of how the world is set up. There's the sky track where the sun, Savitur, goes around, where the Ashvin and their chariots are going around. And there's the ground. And there's this sort of in-between space called Antariksha, which is the, I suppose you would say the sky. People sort of translate this in a bunch of different ways. But that is described as, in one of the Vedas, I think in the first mandala of the Rig Veda, somewhere is described as the path of Yama. So it's the path that souls take to get to Yama. And so it does seem like souls are imagined as traveling through the sky, but it's not clear that that necessarily relates directly to celestial bodies. The various celestial bodies that there are generally in a position in the Vedas to be stirring up life, to be awakening life, to be making life go. Whereas Yama is doing quite the opposite.
Yeah, that actually leads on to my next question. I was going to ask, do you think the movement of the sun or the stars did play a role in how people imagined the souls traveling to Yama?
Yeah, it's hard to say. I mean, it would make sense if the orbits were sort of a model for going under the Earth. But I don't know of any direct evidence to that effect.
Okay, yeah, that makes... When it comes to Yama, do you think just like in terms of like, I want to say like stars or like relations of the orbit, as like the sun passes by, the moon passes by, do you
Mhm.
do you like in your personal opinion, do you think that it connects to Yama?
Yeah, I'm not sure what that would really mean or how to interpret that. With respect to the stratum of Indian religious texts that I'm most familiar with, which is the really old ones, it does not really seem as though Yama is seen to have much to do with those celestial bodies, except that the gods that they are can help you avoid having to go on the paths of Yama. And except that he is, I think, a descendant of one of the sun gods.
Okay. Well, yeah, I mean that honestly that makes completely sense. But we'll move on to the next one now. We'll talk about the Egyptian god Osiris. As a cultural historian yourself, do you think Osiris's connection to Orion, the constellation, shaped Egypt's ideas about death and rebirth?
For me, it's hard to say which direction the connection goes there. Um, whether Osiris is connected to that constellation because of pre-existing ideas about cycles of death and rebirth, or whether the connection with the constellation goes first. But I really want to punt on the Osiris question and just let Elaine answer that.
Okay, yeah. So we'll skip the Egyptians for now then, and we'll move on to the Aztecs. We'll move on to Mictlantecuhtli. So
Yeah.
first question for that is, how do you think the Aztecs view the sky as like an influence to their ideas about Mictlantecuhtli?
Yeah. Well, Mictlantecuhtli is he's an underworld god, as you probably know already. He's in charge of Mictlan, which is the place of the dead, quite literally. And that is pretty far away from the sky, although there's in the sort of layered structure of the Aztec world picture, there's a lot of parallelism between layers. There are ways of dying that don't involve going to Mictlan, but which involve meeting the rising sun or the setting sun, which the Mexica saw as a reflection in a mirror of the rising sun. So in a way, a false sun. Warriors who die in battle, depending on what text you're looking at, maybe they're reincarnating as hummingbirds or butterflies or other creatures that appear to be having a nice time of life. Or maybe they're ascending to the rising sun. Women who die in childbirth, well, some people say they become terrifying spirits that haunt you. Others say that they ascend to the setting sun. You don't necessarily get a consistent view on this from the various sources that have survived. If it's a problem for the ancient world that a bunch of stuff has been set on fire, this is way more the case for understanding Mexica culture, due to the very clear campaign of destruction that the Spaniards waged against it. I know that we're going to be getting to this later, maybe, but there are representations of the sun passing under the earth as a dark sun, which show up, for instance, in the Codex Borgia. This is one of these, one of the in that case, Mixtec, but using a similar cultural iconography. One of the sort of picture books that has survived.
Yeah, that actually did lead to my next question about the sun passing through the underworld. How do you think the Aztecs viewed that in terms of understanding Mictlantecuhtli?
Well, I'm not sure that it necessarily inflects their understanding of Mictlan and Mictlan as much as it changes their view of the sun. The sun is central to Mexica ritual practice and probably also to religious belief in a pretty distinctive way. The sun is something that gets reborn every cosmic cycle. There are various myths of 4 suns, 5 suns, 7 suns that are sort of catalogs of previous suns. And what happens when the sun kind of runs out of gas is the world ends. And everybody gets turned into monkeys or fish or something. Now, we are currently in the sun of one movement, and that sun has to be kept going by being fed a particular part of the human soul, the tonal, which via ritual sacrifice in the temples that are on top of these large pyramids, the Mexica priesthood manages to do. So you're keeping the sun going and keeping it alive so that the sun keeps you alive. And from that point of view, it's interesting that the sun actually goes dark and goes underground and goes to the realm where the dead live as well. Although, and you might want to talk to Zach Zimmer about this, there are some alternative readings of that codex that I think read the same iconography as having to do with Venus, making the transition between the morning star and the evening star.
Okay, I actually might look into that too. So we talked a lot about the sun and it rising, setting, and disappearing. How do you think the sun influenced the beliefs of these underworld gods and like across these different cultures?
Well, I think that what you see in some of these cultures, though not all of them, is the underworld being used to explain the disappearance of the sun from day to day. So where does it go? In some Egyptian cosmologies, the sun goes to the underworld. In some Mexica cosmologies, the sun goes to the underworld. So the underworld is a place to hide the sun, to explain why it's not shining at night. Don't know that you can say the same about Vedic or early Greek cosmologies.
Okay, yeah, I mean, it's a really interesting topic trying to like compare and contrast these different cultures, because they all have their own beliefs, and it's really difficult to really get into all of them. But when comparing these like 4 gods, what do you think are some like similarities and differences you see between these cultures?
Well, that's a hard question to answer briefly. With respect to Yama and Hades, there is probably at some level actually a historical relationship between those gods. They're not linguistic cognates, but there are some features of both of them as underworld gods that suggest a shared sort of Proto-Indo-European heritage that goes back to when Greek and Sanskrit were the same language, many 10,000, 15,000 years ago. For instance, they both have dogs. who sit around and guard things. The dogs of Yama are described as four-eyed. Cerberus, the dog of Hades, is three-headed, so they're slightly abnormal dogs. Though the four-eyed tag in the case of the dogs of Yama has been thought to suggest that they just have like eyebrow marks, as some types of dogs do. Hard to say, but that's a point of similarity, let's say. There are points of contrast too. The notion of the passage to Yama, making a path to Yama, is pretty important in the Vedas to in that way make a path that makes an easy passage from the world of the living to the world of the fathers, as it's framed in the Vedas, the land of the dead. Whereas in Greek stories about Hades, often it's the difficulty of access that's really emphasized. Hades, of course, too, is paradigmatically the invisible god. Aides means not visible. His land, the land of the dead, is a land where people go to be invisible. And so I think in detail, they're very distinct figures. Hades in particular is as far as Greek gods go, actually a little short on personality. He doesn't do all that much. Whereas Yama ends up playing a fairly important role in creation stories as they develop later. Yama and Yami are the primal twins. In some creation myths. That in turn is pretty distinct from Mictlantecuhtli, who is ruler of the Underworld. Does not really go around doing stuff. The paths down there are only crossable by the gods. There is this story that you might have found where Quetzalcoatl has to go down there to grab the materials to make new humans after one of these world-ending catastrophes that I was mentioning before. And he has to grab these bones and sort of trick Mictlantecuhtli in order to sneak out of there. He ends up getting in a little bit of trouble with a quail on the way out, but that's a story for another time. Generally, I guess for Meshika and Greek and early Hindu cultures, there's a kind of convergence on locating the underworld and locating underworld gods beneath the ground. And I say that's a convergence rather than just a point of agreement, because, like I said, in the Odyssey, in our earliest Greek depiction of it, the underworld's not underground. It's at the edge of the universe. It's not totally clear in the Vedas that the realm of Yama is under the ground. But in both cases, Hades ends up being sort of paradigmatically under the ground for later Greek writers. Yama gets moved to Naraka, which is an underground hell. So there is a tendency to put this stuff under the ground, even if it doesn't start there. That, I guess, is a point of contact that might have something to do with where the bodies go, although that varies from culture to culture too, where they end up.
Yeah, I mean, the thing about these different cultures is that they really... I want to ask you just a quick question with that. How do you think these different cultures were made? Because you see these tons of similarities and differences, but how do you think these were all like put together?
Well, I don't know. Put together kind of suggests that somebody was trying to put them together,
Oh,
but I think it's just generations and generations of people making stuff up, and something which people on the internet love to do now, trying to make the whole accumulated lore be consistent somehow by developing these elaborate sort of theories and timelines and such.
yeah, honestly, I would agree with you on that part.
And a lot of it has to do too with I think like explaining the stuff that we do, right? Like, why do we put dead people on the ground, for instance? Or why are we sacrificing human beings? Why do we want to die in battle? Something like that. Those rituals and just like everyday life practices call for explanation too, and I think that also puts a lot of pressure on the stories that people are telling, and eventually on the world picture that they come up with.
Yeah, well, thank you so much for that. That insight. It was honestly really helpful for me, but also I'm hoping it's helpful for everyone who watches this video. Anyways, for the sake of time, I just want to briefly say thank you so much for your time. If it would be possible, if there's any follow-up questions or anything, can people reach out to you?
Yeah, my email address should be at the bottom of the screen somewhere. Hopefully my email address will not be published on YouTube, because then I would have to throw that email address into an incinerator and wash my hands.
Yeah.
But on the poster, I assume it'll
Yeah.
maybe be available for people. Yeah, so what do you think about all this?
Well, for me personally, it's a lot of information.
Mhm.
It's really interesting though to see how these different cultures come up, like how these different cultures have their own ideas, but at the same time they're similar to each other.
Yeah, but I think that you chose a really interesting and also very challenging topic,
Yeah.
because under the ground is the last place that you
Mhm.
expect to find any sort of interesting astronomy. But there are some of the cultures that you're talking about here that do use the underground as a place for the sun and various other celestial bodies to go. And so I think that does say something about, ancient cosmologies and pictures of the world, as well as what people thought they were looking at when they were looking at the sky.
Yeah, this is a really difficult concept to get into, because it is the underworld, and there's not really,
Yeah.
people think of the underworld as something dark, like you won't see
Mhm.
anything, and it's really difficult. But that's honestly why I chose it. It's because I'm like, if there is an underworld, there has to be some sort of connection to the underworld and the sky. So that's what I've been trying to figure out.
Yeah, and I think that there is, in a way that is difficult to figure out, and it's going to vary from culture to culture. But yeah, I wish you the best of luck, and if you have any follow-up questions, feel free to get in touch with me.
All right, thank you so much, Professor Devecka, and just thank you. And
Yeah, no problem.
I guess that ends today's video. Yeah. Thank you all for joining me in today's podcast with Professor Martin Devecka on ancient underworld deities across different cultures. Thanks again, and I'll see you in the next one. Goodbye.